a dream but feel stuck, if you are facing obstacles that seem overwhelming, or if you just need a dose of motivation to keep pushing forward, then you are in the right place. So buckle up, dreamers. Anchor Your Dreams is not just a podcast, it's a community of dreamers supporting dreamers, women supporting women. Subscribe, follow along, and let's navigate the seas of ambition together. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered. The journey begins now. How are you?
Good. Oh man, you're breaking out the toque. Is it cold in BC?
It's kind of chilly. It's probably not as chilly to warrant me wearing it in my house, but it's one of those hair days.
Okay, I get that. And even like sometimes, so this is what I find. I like to push, I like to test myself as to how long can I go into the cold weather months without turning on my heat. And for whatever reason, it has become a point of pride if I can make it past December 1st. And so I know, I think last year I did it, and the year before I caved like midway through November. Um, but even sometimes when it's warm out, it's like it's still cold inside because the house just insulates. And so I made an exception for myself last year and I turned on the fireplace and justified it that I wasn't cheating because it wasn't the furnace.
I love that because that's so funny. I normally have I also take pride in how long I can go without starting our fire. We have a wood stove,
Okay.
and the first year we moved into this house, we didn't have a wood stove until, gosh, I want to say mid-November. This is going back 12 years. Um, and so every year since then, I'm like, okay, I just got to make it to mid-November, like we did without our first year in this house. But the funny thing is, either two things, and each one could be true or together. I've noticed either my tolerance has completely shifted and changed, or it's just the weather has changed at different times that I have not been able to make it that long anymore. Even, it was a stretch for me this year not to start the wood stove like early. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll just start it, but it doesn't have to go like all day long. I'll just start it and take that edge off. And
Yeah.
well, as soon as that comfort hit,
Yes.
it was like, oh, wait, I actually really, really liked that. I need to feel that again the next day and the next day. You know what I mean?
And all day.
Well, yeah. So actually, yeah, from, so our wood stove has been going probably consistently for the last like 3 days straight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to let it go out. I don't want it to get cold.
I get
But
that. There's just something about comfort. And before it even got cold, I said to my partner, Shahid, I'm like, because I think we had like one cold day and I went out into the sun or something and just experienced how delightful it felt to be warm. And I said to him, I don't think I'm going to push us to see how far we can go because I just want to be comfortable. Like, I'm naturally, my body type is quite thin. I don't have like insulation. It's very hard for my body to keep itself warm without help. Um, yeah, so we'll see. It's been pretty warm here, so
yeah, when you said December 1st though, I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like I thought
it's nice.
I thought I was hardcore. That's pretty hardcore.
All the blankets, all the socks, all the slippers, all the vests. But I'm like,
Right.
what am I trying to prove? And to who? I know I can
Mm,
do it. So let's
right?
just choose comfort over suffering.
This could totally go into a wild topic of conversation.
It
Um,
could.
but before we dive into that and get like going that way, I just want to say I'm here today with Kate Rogers from Kate Rogers Creations. Thank you, Kate, for being here with us on the Anchor Your Dreams podcast. I love your sweater. I also had to point that out because I had your
Get the
website
hearts.
up. Yeah, I love that. I had your website up and I was like admiring this sweater of yours. I was like, oh, I love that sweater. I wonder where she got it. And then here you are today wearing that same sweater. So where did you
I
get this
forgot.
sweater?
I forgot I have photos on my website of me wearing this. So when was I I got a speaking engagement last year in September for a conference, and I didn't have anything that felt like the right outfit that I wanted to represent me to wear. So I work in Toronto, a full-time job still, and on one of the days that I was in the office, I was gonna go and walk from downtown up to the Eaton Center. So for those who are in Toronto, if they're familiar, like that's the biggest mall in Toronto. And I was gonna go there to see like what do they have. But on my way, I found this little boutique store that I just thought I'm gonna pop in and see what they have. And this was one of the sweaters. And I'm like, well, that's so me. It's fun, it's classic, it represents like the love that I infuse into my paintings and that I hope other people can cultivate for themselves. So it just felt like the perfect fit to represent me on stage. And it was called Options for Her in Toronto. I think they have two locations.
Well, I do really like it, and I will probably go see if I can order one online after this.
I can give you the brand if that like helps.
If there's a if the store name isn't the same as the brand name, yeah, do
I,
share.
I'll send it to you after because I don't know off the top of my head.
And who knows, maybe they won't have anything that particular one in online or anything, but I do really enjoy it. I do really like hearts. It's something I like. I'm constantly like seeing them in nature, whether it's a leaf that's sitting in a certain way, rocks. Actually, um, this past summer I was house sitting a little bit for my mom, and she lives near the beach, and there was this what I thought was a rock and it looked like a heart and I went to pick it up and it was so light feeling and I was like, well, what is this? And then I realized it was a piece of wood and then on further inspection I realized it was like the knot out of like a bigger piece of wood. And yeah, I kept it. I think my dog might have gotten a hold of it, unfortunately. It's around somewhere, but I was just like, oh, this is so neat because it's shaped like a heart.
That's very cool. How often like does one find the knot of a piece of wood without it not being in the piece of wood?
I'm so glad I stopped and inspected it and picked it up to further find that. So I'd love to hear what brought you to where you are today on the journey that you've been on.
Oh, yeah. So that can be depending on how far back you want to go because like life is a series of events and one thing I've really come to learn is you don't know where one thing is going to lead into the next and as soon as you make like one choice or one decision that splits the path that you're on and unfolds a whole bunch of different events that are yet to come that you don't know but if you had chose something different it would have been a totally different trajectory that you're on so I guess there's three things that really stand out that brought me to where I am. And where I am right now is I'm still working a corporate job, but I am an artist as well. I am building a business doing like art workshops for events, speaking engagements, and it's a lot to do together, but there is such a greater love for life that I have now and a belief that anything is really possible, that the only limits that exist are the ones that I impose on myself. And I identify that because it's not so different of a place from like a career and job perspective that I'm in now as I was even a couple years ago, but the difference is in the mindset and my beliefs. And so if I go back a couple of years, I was still working a full-time job. I wasn't in corporate yet. I was actually working for a not-for-profit in the healthcare industry. And I was only a couple years into the workforce. Like I was fresh, I was new. I was objectively not in a position to be wishing for retirement. And when I would say like I can't wait till I retire, people would laugh thinking like you got your whole career ahead of you. And I started to feel like there was something wrong with me for not wanting to work. And I've
Mm-hmm.
realized it's not that I don't want to work, it's that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to work a job that I didn't love. And it took me a number of years. Like my belief at the time was that only the lucky few people get to find a job that they truly love. And I often looked to my brother who knew early on that he was going to be an entrepreneur, and he still is. Like he has his own business and he loves it. He has such a passion for the industry that he is in. And that was kind of my point of reference because we're very close in age. And so I would look to him, who is a little bit more than a year younger than me, thinking like, you found what you love. How, like, why is it so difficult for me? And that just really led to such a deep and immense longing and discontent of like going through these motions of, well, I'm in a long-term relationship with a good guy, great family. I have a job right out of university that pays decently well for entry level in this field. Like, what more? I have the means to travel and enjoy my life. Like, why aren't I happy? And it took going on a spontaneous trip to Portugal where because I was living for vacation at that point, even after I left the not-for-profit job, and I realized that I would leave jobs about every 2 years, not because I outgrew them or because I truly wanted something different. I just got bored. And it
Mm.
was that longing and discontent that wanted me to have a change. And it was the change that made things more interesting. But then that novelty of having something new wore off again a couple years later. So I was living for vacation. I booked a spontaneous trip to Portugal on like one of the flight deals. I got a notification that I could fly to Portugal for like $253. It wasn't even a budget airline. I'm like, okay, am I gonna go? Am I gonna go? And I I don't know if you get this, but when you're about to make a big decision that feels way out of your comfort zone and it requires you to input like your credit card information online and you've done all of the steps, but you're just like hovering your little cursor over the confirm button or submit. And I'm like, do I? Don't I? Like,
I just felt that right inside me. As soon as you started explaining that, I was like, I actually just had that feeling very recently. Like I have a big trip coming up in the new year, and that's the feeling that I got. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's something about taking charge of your decisions and when there's money on the line where you know your heart wants it. You got to this checkout page for a reason, but there's something, maybe it is like a money block, maybe it
Hmm.
is a belief in self block. Like it could be a whole bunch of different things, but there's something that's making you hesitate.
Yes.
And oftentimes that's the head getting in the way of you honoring and going after what you know feels really good for you. So I eventually I clicked submit or confirm or whatever the button said.
Yeah.
And I was going to Portugal. I was depressed at the time. And to me, it still is, even years later, like so nutty that I would go and book a solo trip in a foreign country, in an unfamiliar country when I'm at my lowest. But it just felt like I needed to do it. And a couple of
Hmm.
years prior, I had spent 6 months traveling India and Southeast Asia by myself. And there was just something in me that felt like I need to let myself know I can still travel alone, that I still have the ability to feel free in my life because those 6 months were the most free and empowered and enjoyable that I think I've ever had. And I wanted
Hmm.
to experience that again. And so I did. And that trip itself was really quite transformative. And I came back I didn't even, I did come back, but it was on that trip where I realized I went on like this 21-kilometer hike. I didn't realize like how long it was. At the time, if I had of, it probably would have deterred me. I'm glad that I didn't know because like it was so impactful. And I was literally in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't have a compass. I didn't have a GPS. I had no idea really where I was going. I just kind of like hoped to goodness that the direction I was going was the right one. I thought like this has got to be it. I don't know what else it could be. So it felt like a leap of faith in its own right, just the walking that I was doing. And it was so open and the landscape was so awe-inspiring and there wasn't a single soul. It was me. The place that I was walking was called like the end of the world. And it felt like that because there wasn't any
That's
other signs of life.
that was the name like you found in some sort of a travel book path to the end of the world. You took it by yourself.
You, you know what? Now that you point that out, given the mindset that I was in, it seems actually kind of quite fitting. It's like, okay, I'm not loving my life, so let's just go to where the world ends and see what's there. Yeah.
I really I do I appreciate the story and I think there is something to be said about being at our lowest state and still making choices and still trying to tap into our intuition and knowing what's good for us in that moment. And it sounds like that's what you did. You took a leap of faith, but also had like something inside you knowing that this was the right choice to make at the same time. And I'm sure hindsight, looking back and seeing it all like playing it back, it was a huge transformative experience for you.
Mhm. Yeah, it was. And man, yeah, so much comes up even just thinking about that. And yeah, man, I'm putting myself back there. Um, I've always been a very determined person. And so I find when factors are out of your control, and at the time my state of being felt very much out of my control. I hadn't yet found like where can I influence the direction that I go next because it felt like life was happening to me. I had no idea what I could do differently to change my circumstances. And so this was my attempt at doing that, or one of them. And it's very difficult when you're at your lowest, when you're experiencing a bout of depression. And I can't speak to like what it's like to be chronically depressed, but certainly situationally, it's more temporary than chronic. And so in those times, like you have a choice to succumb and get lower and get more out of touch or more disconnected with your ability to start changing your circumstances, or you can rally and say, okay, I'm experiencing this and I'm going to go and do something about it. It might not be the thing that changes it, but I'm going to try. And there were times on that trip where I seriously questioned, why am I here? I don't know
Mm.
anybody. It feels incredibly lonely. And I already feel like alone within myself. And now here I am with nothing familiar around me, nobody to share these moments with. But at some point along that trip, and I think it started with that walk, I really relished in how being alone in a place that felt so awe-inspiring to me actually allowed me to experience a deeper connection to myself, to feel so low, yet so enamored with my surroundings that it's like I felt something positive again. And
Mm,
it was
hmm.
wonderful. I loved exploring and feeling with no pressure of where that feeling would lead to, if that makes sense.
Totally does. I love how you just explain that too. Feeling but no pressure. And I feel like Um, there's so much pressure from so many different avenues, scenarios, all the things, feeling a certain way in a certain moment and all these different things. And it does, it can, the pressure of having these feelings can really pop up, but having the freedom in that moment, just it sounds like it was just a really overall grounding experience and being able to be present with yourself and those surroundings around you. Kind of, yeah, I feel like I can understand what you're saying. I've had moments, I wouldn't say like, I haven't picked a trail that's called end of the world, but I get that feeling when I'm up on the mountain. When I
Mhm.
go skiing and I'm up on the mountain at the very top and the chairlift is coming up all the way up to the top and it's a clear day and I get to see like everything below the ocean, more mountains, like the valley in which I live in and everything. And there's just this incredible feeling that it really comes over me. It's like,
Mhm.
and there isn't a control, it just comes up, comes over me. But I also have a sense of relief from that happening at the same time because oftentimes, yeah, I mean, could have been a day where I was struggling to get my kids up to the mountain and going and being in that sort of mind frame of, I just want to get up there and this is out of my control to have my children do something that I love to do. But when I get to that top and I get to see everything, it's just like everything kind of just, it's like a big deep breath with the earth all at the same time. Like a big
Mhm.
deep breath with everything around me all at the same time, happening in unison. Like that's how I would explain it.
Yeah, no, and I get that. Like being outside is one thing, but it's more than that. It's being outside, at least for me, in a certain type of environment where there is an openness and it can be a view. Like a view gives openness, but like when I think back to this walk in Portugal, there wasn't a view. It was very flat. And just there's something about being able to see so far ahead of you. It's like, okay, there's so much out there and it can all be mine. I don't know what that looks like, but there's so much to explore if I want it. And that just feels really invigorating.
Well, totally. I can relate to this a lot. Also, we have this trail here where we live, and it's called Seal Bay Park, and you walk through forest and you come down like through trails and then you come out onto the beach. So
Mhm.
there's this, and it's interesting because I don't tend to walk in trails because I feel so closed in. It starts to feel claustrophobic and people are like, "Let's go walk in the trails." I'm like, "I don't really want that. I want openness."
Yes.
And I don't mind Seal Bay if some of my friends are like, "Let's go walk Seal Bay," because I know I just have this little part to get through that I'm not too, fond of. And then I get to be in that openness, that vastness, that sort of like, again, it's like as soon as I get down there, not that I hold my breath actually, but it's like this sense of holding my breath until I get to that spot. And then I feel like I can release and breathe again. And that's,
Yes.
yeah, the openness.
Yes.
And like you said, um, there wasn't necessarily a view or anything, but just like, yeah, it puts things into a different perspective, I feel like.
It does. And I feel like in this day and age where you have developments going up all over the place, you don't even have to be in the city to feel like there's a lot of development. Like suburbs are constantly expanding, new buildings going up. You have smaller and smaller worlds conceptually in the sense that like on social media, for example, like the tendency is there's so much out there, so much information and resources, but I think the tendency is to focus on what resonates, or echo chambers is a term that's often used to kind of validate your own thinking. So in that sense, like worlds get smaller. We have population expanding, and it feels like even though the world is the same size, your view of it in your immediate day-to-day life, I don't even know if we've realized, because it's like happened so in such baby steps over a period of time, that it's gotten smaller, and it requires more intention to actually step out of that, like our social circle, our home, especially people who work from home most of the time and they're actually not going out as much. I'm one of those people. Viewpoints, like all of these things, it requires intention to get away from that and realize how much more there is outside of what you've become accustomed to and familiar with.
Mm, yes. So many different like little pings of thoughts came up with that. Um, but I do want to get back to your journey and so you took this trip to Portugal
Mhm.
at a low point. So after this walk and going through this walk and everything, what was the next step for you?
Yeah, well, I came home and I kind of like I went back to the job, and it was just regular day-to-day life again. And I don't remember how long exactly it took, but I realized, okay, I've experienced a change. I have a deeper belief now that I can do something different. And the order of events gets a little bit blurry. Like, I don't remember if I changed jobs recently after, or if I left my relationship first and moved out, but the order doesn't even really matter. I now pursued more change, and that included leaving the long-term relationship that I was in. And maybe I'm even jumping ahead a little bit, but I think actually, yes. So before that, I started painting. It was my very first painting. I can't remember exactly what compelled me to want to take this on. Like, I was living in a rental house at the time with the person who I was in a relationship with at the time. And yes, there were blank walls. I could have bought things. I think I was still in this like university student savvy mindset, which like I still have to this day. I have like this little motto where why pay more when you can pay less? And that usually comes to finding deals and discounts. But um I came across this painting, this do-it-yourself painting on Pinterest that somebody had done. And I was like, I can do that. And I had seen lots of abstract artwork that other people had done, like even established artists, not necessarily somebody doing a do-it-yourself project. I was like, those are so easy. Like anybody could do it. Why? Like, how can artists pay money for this when I could draw two circles on a piece of canvas and call it art and charge, $2,000?
Yeah,
And
I'm
like
only
that was my
laughing. Yeah, sorry. I'm only laughing because I have the same way of thinking about a lot of things.
yes. Well, okay, Megan, let me tell you, until you actually try and recreate somebody's piece of art, totally get why that's the belief. Having now experienced the other side, it's so hard to recreate, and not there's kind of two elements of this. And so I'll use it in the context of this painting that I tried to copy because I saw it. I'm like, that's easy. And like, how hard could it be? I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it bigger. She did like a 20 by 20, so slightly less than 2 feet by 2 feet canvas. And I'm like, I'm going to go 48 by 48. So, like, what business did I have to think that I could just go to an art store, pick up the largest canvas that didn't even fit in my car? I had to bring it home in a cargo van and go to town creating somebody else's vision. And that's it. It was somebody else's vision. I couldn't recreate it because I wasn't that person. I wasn't in her mindset, with her experiences, with her energy, with her creativity. I was somebody else. And so I was getting so darn frustrated trying to recreate something and it wasn't turning out. And the other thing with abstract is when you're looking at the finished piece, it's obvious on the surface that, okay, maybe red was used on top and blue was below the red, but you can't just reverse engineer that because there's so much other layering that goes into it and spontaneousness that goes into marks and color choice that you just can't logic your way through step one, step two, step three. It doesn't work that way. So it wasn't until I realized or even I didn't realize at the time. I was like, I'm so sick of not liking what I'm creating. I'm going to try something different. And I started to get really excited. And so I've since dubbed this feeling heart sparks. And I often encourage people like, go follow your heart sparks. It's that feeling when you do something and the excitement just overcomes you. You don't necessarily know why you're feeling that way or what exactly is sparking it, but just what you've done has sparked this jolt of energy and excitement and joy and intrigue in doing more and following this path that I think like that to me is what I strive to hold on to. And I now like use that as something to anchor and guide my own art process. So yeah, all that to say, just going back to this like anybody can create a simple looking piece of art. Well, first of all, the simpler the piece of art, the actual like more difficult it is to create.
Yeah.
And you gotta make it your own. Like it's not gonna look the same. Even something simple that you can conceptually replicate on canvas or paper, it just you will know, you will feel something. And it's usually for me at least, it's like this disconnect. Like, okay, it looks quite similar, but it doesn't feel like me. And
Hmm.
it doesn't feel right to hang this on my wall and have it be somebody else's vision that I tried to copy because I didn't believe in myself enough to create something that was purely led by my own thoughts and inspiration. So that painting took me 4 years, five maybe, and it went through so many different iterations, but it was such a process of evolution and realizing what I'm capable of, kind of like how what I tried to recreate for myself going to Portugal and wanting to feel how I felt when I was traveling India and Southeast Asia. Like this painting
Hmm.
was that, but here in Canada, where I didn't have to like be on a plane in a foreign country out of my comfort zone, I was able to get out of my comfort zone in so many different ways through painting. And um right. So when I finished that, at least the version of it at the time, because it's gone through so many
Right.
versions, I I ended up leaving the relationship, that I was able to admit to myself that this is not what I want. It was through doing uncomfortable things and pushing the boundaries of what I actually thought I could do that made me realize how much more I could have, that I didn't need to settle for what I didn't want. And there was just a turning point in this relationship that I realized it's not for me. I'm not happy. I'm not getting what I need. There's only so much that one person in a relationship can do before, like, it's not all on one person. And so I left and I moved into a really decrepit house it was a shared house with three other roommates. I hadn't done that in a number of years. And I thought, okay, here I am, like I'm employed and I'm an adult and I'm living in a shared home. Like this sucks. And it's not even a nice home. It just felt icky. So I did everything I could to make my room that was private to me a sanctuary that felt clean and warm, like energetically warm, not temperature warm, and just like a place I wanted to be where I could exhale from the yuckiness of the rest of the house.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it was so I guess to sum up, it was longing and discontent that I ended up realizing I didn't need to settle for. getting out of my comfort zone and experiencing how being alone can actually, under the right circumstances, make you feel more connected to yourself, pushing and exploring what you're capable of through art. And then when I was going through major transition and making a sanctuary out of the space that was truly mine, made me realize the importance of your environment and like the power that you have to change your reality, and that there's a couple of different tools that you can implement to help support you through transition and to help anchor you into what feels most important as you realize new things about yourself and the desires that you have for your life. So yeah, that was kind of like the 3 or 4 step process to getting me to where I am now, which I am still working a full-time job. It is still not what I want to be doing for forever because it feels too restrictive for the
Mm-hmm.
life that I want to have. But I love it because I believe now that like happiness and joy and fun, it's all a mindset. You can be going through really crappy situations and still enjoy your day-to-day moment. And this is a, we don't have to go into this, but I just wrapped up like a really prime example of it was a very intense work period, lots of things not going well or right. And I was enjoying myself. And most of my team members were in less great moods than me. And it's because, I had experienced enough times that I get to choose what my experience is like. And I can recognize that it sucks and I can enjoy it. So,
Yeah, that's that sort of like and I like to say and also one of my friends mentioned that last year there was something we were talking about and it's experiencing two things at the same time. We can experience, being discontent with way things are going or unhappy in, one aspect of our lives, and also be able to feel and tap into joy and build that in back into our lives and sort of like weave it through there. So,
yes.
and it sounds like for you, creativity and art is one of those ways that you are able to do that.
Mhm.
So, I'm curious, how do you fit it in and balance while working a full-time job? And part of the reason why I'm really curious is because I think there are lots of people out there that are doing that because it really takes a lot to just all of a sudden try to open up your own business or start something new and not have another job. We often, as entrepreneurs, have to use funds from one avenue to funnel into our startups. So I'm just, yeah, curious, like how did you find it when you really started um, adding more into Kate Rogers Creations as far as building that out from a business standpoint to where it is today and have a full-time job?
Yeah, well, I think with anything that you truly love, and some people may recognize this and other people may not, you find time for what you love the most. And there is this mentality, especially in corporate or where you are working for somebody else, and it's true, like time is limited. Time doesn't always feel like your own, but there is still always time. And it's just about what are you prioritizing? Where are you actually spending it? That if you really want to do something, you can carve out time in your day. And so for me, it became priority. Like sometimes it's easier for me working from home because I have the ability to go from like my office, which I'm in now, to where I paint. But like over lunch periods, I would go and I would spend an hour, or after work, typically like early afternoon or late afternoon, early evening is where I feel more inspired. And it also, it helps me transition. So because I don't love my day job, if that's all I had, I have no doubt I would be back in that feeling of longing and discontent, not loving my life. But when I work a full day of my day job and then I go and I do something that I know fulfills me and shows me what I can do, because I'm literally taking something that doesn't exist and making something that now does exist from that nothing, reminds me of like, okay, I have the power. I have agency. I have autonomy. I get to choose what happens next. And I am choosing to both work and find time for this. And I want to give that to other people who aren't sure how to make what they want happen. And it doesn't even have to be a long session. I can get a fair bit of painting done in an hour, partly because I'm not a realistic painter, so it's not like I'm, working on the same tree bark or flower petal for hours at a time. But so I get to see progress more quickly than perhaps somebody who paints more realistically. You find time for what's important. And if you don't feel like you can find time for what's important, then I would say that there's maybe a belief that exists that's actually preventing you from finding that time, because I'm confident that the time exists.
Right. And that's kind of going back to the blocks that you were talking about before, whether it's a financial block, um,
Mhm.
trying to navigate between making money from your one job and also spending money on creating a business, but also needing it to start making you money so that you can lessen the other job or something like that. I
Mhm.
do think that for a lot of people, um, money blocks and confidence
Mhm.
in being able to make things happen and finding the time and everything plays a huge part in it. I know for
Yeah.
myself, when it comes to creativity, I have this idea that I need a certain chunk of time to do it. And if I don't have that chunk of time in the day to do it, well, there goes the day.
Yeah.
But really, it comes down to a choice on my part of like even 5 minutes,
Mhm.
5 minutes of sitting there sketching something, or playing in Canva on creating content or something. It doesn't need to be hours set aside every day if if
Mhm.
if your life also demands other things from you as well. So,
That's so true. And I think often we actually misgauge how long we actually need. And a great example to illustrate that point is like with household chores and work that needs to be done, whether it's emptying the dishwasher or cleaning the dishes in the sink or vacuuming, that we think, oh, I need that the dishwasher is going to take 30 minutes. It definitely does not take 30 minutes. And if you set a timer and you see, oh my gosh, emptying 2 trays of full of dishes only took 4 minutes and 13 seconds, it just puts a whole new perspective on things. And so, same with creativity or a task in your business, it might feel like it takes a long time because you don't know exactly how you want to do it, or because there's something else at play making you think that you need more time than you do. But even putting 15 minutes towards an hour-long task, well, look, you're 15 minutes closer to finishing that hour-long task, even if you didn't do it all in one go. And similar with like the money block that you mentioned, and whether or not you have enough money to do something, or if you're working a full-time job for an income, but now you're taking that money and putting it towards building a business, like, does that feel comfortable or justified for somebody? I love painting because there's so many lessons in it. And there's a money lesson too, because and I was this way up until maybe like 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, where you buy these paints and they come in a set size, and there's some, depending on the actual shade, that are a lot more pricey than others. There's Pyrrole Red, which is this beautiful, rich kind of fire engine red. And for, I forget the size of the tube, but it's a small tube and it's like $32 for 6 ounces or something. And so artists who are just starting out tend to use paint quite sparingly because they view it as an expense that needs to be like paid again and again and again. And it does because you're using up material. But you cannot create the most impactful, rewarding art when you're being stingy with the amount that you put into it because you can't do as much and you're coming from this restrictive place of lack that puts in all of the wrong energy. I'm presuming wrong energy from how you
Hmm.
actually want your painting to feel because I don't think
Mm.
somebody creates to show an expression of themselves and then want that expression to be limited. And then if somebody's going to buy it, they don't want that person to feel limited. But that's what's happening when they're restrictive in the amount of paint they actually use. So I like
Oh,
dumped almost the whole tube on a piece of canvas and I was like, okay, just doing it. And I'm very liberal with my paint now, especially like, and it's hard because many layers end up getting covered up. So it's like, okay, I don't want to use a lot of paint now on these early layers because I know the painting isn't near done and I'm going to be covering most of it up. But when you do it enough and you
yeah.
get comfortable with doing it enough, you realize it's a necessary aspect of the creation process and you
I
just need to give yourself exposure.
I feel like this would be a great experience in some type of a money workshop. Like honestly, just everything you just, I was like visualizing myself cringing when my children pour so much paint into their paint tray and then like 20 minutes later it's being washed down the sink because they didn't use it. And just as you were even talking about limiting the art, limiting the energy, that's exactly what happens to me. It's very limiting. Whether it's you in so yeah, it can be applied to so many different things. I'm like that with, a pencil, a ink, um, writing a word that I don't want and scratching it off. There goes more ink, and that's a waste of ink, or not using up a full page to write in my journal. So I don't even write because I feel like I only have one word that wants to come out in that moment. And I have to start a new page every time. Um, but it's this limitations that we put on ourselves, and whether it's to do with money or anything, it's limiting the energy. The output of energy is being limited, and really overall, when it comes to art and creativity, that matters a lot.
Mhm. Yes, and what I've come to learn is recognizing the block is important, and even more so is experiencing what it feels like to be on the other side of it. Doesn't mean that the block never comes up again, but just using the paint on canvas analogy. Okay, if you're feeling restricted to actually use a lot of paint, that feels like one thing. And then if you were to actually go through with putting half a tube on a piece of canvas, the process of doing that might feel greatly uncomfortable. But then after it's done, it more likely than not feels so relieving and even
Mm.
exciting. Like, oh, I just did the thing I didn't feel like I could do. And yes, it felt really uncomfortable, but it feels so good having done it. And that goes for really any uncomfortable thing. It doesn't have to be money related. Like I think of, like I used to be a competitive rock climber and I would choose my vacation destinations based off of renowned climbing places. And the feeling of doing something that felt really scary, maybe because like I'm scared of heights, I do not like being high, but what I often say about climbing is, well, you're not looking down, like you're looking up. Um, So sometimes there were moves that were really scary or they felt really exposed or risky for what the fall was going to be.
Mm,
And I loved it most because of how it challenged my mindset and pushed me to be better. And time and again, I would be like set up for this move that I needed to do in climbing. And I could feel my my heart wanting to go for it, my brain like almost convincing me, but my body truly just not cooperating. But when I would manage to align whatever needed to be aligned to actually go for it, even if I didn't execute with the accuracy or precision that I needed, it felt so darn good knowing that I did it. And now that I've done it once and didn't get it fully, I can do it again and I can do it better. So it's
mm.
really stepping in, having the active, intentional desire to go into what feels uncomfortable so that you can experience what more there is for like what you're capable of.
I love that. And it does have a compounding effect, I find. And
Mhm.
the more you're putting yourself into a position of being able to feel the contrast between when it is not feeling very good or the after effect of it not feeling good versus it actually feeling good, like you were explaining about the art and the limit, like limiting yourself, but
Mhm.
then also just going with it and that feeling of relief after. I do think that it does have a compounding effect, but we also need to do it more often to remind ourselves as well, because it is so easy to forget that we did something really good and that just goes into a filing cabinet and then we're back to focusing on, or not focusing, but having those limiting beliefs kind of take over again. And it's like a
Yeah.
whole practice from beginning to end that we have to keep doing.
Yeah. It's very much a practice. And I think like even myself as somebody who values getting uncomfortable and experiencing the benefits of it, emotionally and physically, I would way prefer to just be comfortable. Like I think anybody really would. But when you have experienced enough times what it actually feels like to be uncomfortable and what it's like on the other side, there's a new value associated with that. And that now needs to become the driving purpose behind why you're doing uncomfortable things. Because if you don't have that bigger purpose, you're not going to do it. You're going to settle for the immediate gratification of being comfortable and staying where it's familiar. And that is limited because you're not allowing yourself to experience the more that is beyond your comfort zone, beyond familiarity. So it is a practice and I have a rule for myself and I don't have many because like I'm all about getting outside of the rules I've been taught or that I think I need to follow. My art breaks all kinds of rules, but one of the core rules I have in my life is if I don't want to do it, because of discomfort, then I need to. It's no longer an
Mhm.
option not to. And I hold myself to it because that's the growth-oriented mindset that I value having. And I've seen enough times where it leads me and that my life just gets better and better when I put myself out there in ways that don't feel comfortable.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, and that's I like the the way that you explained your rule. It's like the if you're leaning away from it specifically just because it's going to bring discomfort, like looking at that with purpose and seeing the purpose of going through that discomfort and what you'll get on the other side of it and everything.
Mhm.
Um, sorry, I am just looking at my notes because there are so many good things and I had to we did-
Yeah, which direction do we go?
we've talked about so many great things, but one of the things that I do want to just go back to real quick is one of the things that you were talking about before is prioritizing play, especially
Mm.
when you are feeling discouraged. So, I know, you had said as well that you were in a situational depressive state. So how, looking back, I know it's always easy, but if you could think about that time, did you see that this trip was play for you?
Mhm. I didn't at the time, but it seems so obvious now that it was because at its root, at its core, it was exploration. And exploration is play because you're not doing it with any preconceived notion as to what the results are. You're just going and seeing what unfolds. And to me, that is what play is. It's being present in the moment and responding to the next thing that comes up. So I don't think it was the typical thing that we associate with play, but at its core, I think it was.
I love that. When you said the word exploration, for me, being curious for things is really what helps me get through a lot of discomfort as well. It's just like being open and curious and asking questions and okay, can you hold on to this discomfort just a little bit longer and things like that. And yeah, exploration is definitely something that I think brings, well, actually, that's so funny. Okay, I'm so sorry. So I have to go get this because I just
Okay,
noticed this. Sorry, 1 second.
that's no problem. That looks like a vinyl cover.
Okay, so this was okay, I'm sorry. I'm having a moment because we are just talking. I'm sitting at my kitchen counter. We're talking, you bring up the word exploration. We go down this road. I'm just kind of glancing around a space that I'm always at. I happen to catch the word.
I love it.
So this was a very uh, explorative, creative thing that I made. For the people who are listening right now, I just ran across my kitchen and grabbed this piece of art that I put the word explore on. So this photograph was taken at a beach on Hornby Island, one of my favorite beaches to go to. But I printed it on this type of paper that was supposed to go in a light box. But instead of using it for the light box, I Mod Podged it to this wooden canvas
I love Mod Podge.
because when it printed, it distorted all the colors. I didn't purposefully print it so that it would only show the oranges and the darks, like the warm colors. I did not do that on purpose.
What a
So
fluke.
it really was. Yeah, it was a
Because
fun
it looks
little,
so professional. It looks like I didn't realize at the time that that was a photograph that you took. It looks like something that you would buy that somebody put together as this really inspirational piece to make other people feel good about exploring, and that it was just captured at sunset or sunrise.
yeah, and then I used I don't know, what is this? I don't know what I did. I somehow printed the word explore. I can't remember. I don't think I had a Cricut back then. This is quite old.
Oh,
Um,
I love that.
but I think that, I don't know, maybe you've seen them in some of your, there was this time where a lot of corporate sort of places, businesses were printing um, using these types of posters that were meant to sort of be inspirational, right? They would have some form of a picture, either somebody rock climbing, and
Mhm.
then one word or maybe two words
Yeah.
max, just in bright bold. And so many businesses had these around they'd have these stark white, sort of sterile, like office spaces, and then these what were supposed to be very inspirational, but very mass produced art. Um, that's kind of what that makes me think of sometimes when I see the print with art. But I love it at the same time because it gets your mind thinking in a different way. You're not just viewing the art, you're now reading a word and you're kind of connecting the two things together, which kind of brings me to your art because you have a piece behind you and I can't quite get exactly what it says, but if you can read it out loud, that'd be
Yes.
great.
I'm actually kind of glad that you can't read it. And I don't know if it's just because of the screen size. But can I give a little background context
Yes,
of, okay.
yes,
Um,
please do.
I have been like a creative writer for as long as I can remember. And like in my teenage years, I would listen to music on my iPod and I would like write down lyrics that really resonated. And so recently I've started to incorporate more words into my art. And some are really big and obvious to read. And I'm kind of playing with, and I love that. I love the bold statement. And at the same time, I know not that I create for other people, but I have different preferences for myself, so I like being able to provide different options for other people who resonate with my art. But not everybody loves obvious wordage. And so I'm playing with integrating smaller, less obvious words and kind of so like this is the font that I've used. Well, it's my writing, but the size of it, it's not a font. The size is smaller, but I also kind of do the letters kind of weird so that they don't stand out as obvious. So I'll add in lowercase and caps locks and I'll put some letters backwards. So that could also be why it's maybe difficult to read, but it says reality is what you make it.
Mm,
And
mm.
yeah, that's a big theme that's coming up for me and kind of becoming a core belief of mine. And really all of my art is about demonstrating the possibilities that exist beyond what we think is possible and providing an anchor for other people to ground into, like that it's this physical symbolic representation of what's possible for them that they can anchor into to hold the belief and to build the belief in themselves that they can do more, that they don't need to settle for anything that's less than what they desire. And so these statements and when I use singular words, like they just kind of come up sometimes like, okay, that's for a painting. I don't know what painting, but I'm gonna, it's gonna come up on the right painting. I kind of write it down and if I'm needing inspiration for words, I'll look at my list and think, oh yeah, that actually fits with this piece. And other times it just comes up right away. Um, but yeah, incorporating words on my art is becoming a bigger and bigger thing.
I really like that one behind you. I love the warmth of it, but there's also depth to it. And then I like the words as well. I do. It wasn't, I think the last time we had a quick video chat, that wasn't the one that was behind you, I don't think.
I'm constantly changing this. So this is also where I take my work video calls and I like to just change things up often. And this is the space that I will kind of when I have a painting that I've finished recently. So you're getting like a before anybody's seen it sneak peek right now.
Woo!
I'll usually hang them up to like try it on and just see it more and try and get a sense of is it done? Or and like usually I'll know, but I like to just sit with it for a while and because I can also be quite impulsive. So I can be like, oh yeah, I love that. And that's very true in the moment, but then let the feeling settle and I realize, oh no, there's more to it than this impulsive, I love it. I love it and it's not done. I love it and it needs more work, or I love it and I don't love this section. So it's so much more interesting in person where you can see all of the texture and layers underneath. There's lots of interesting marks.
Yeah, so well some of it I can kind of sense that there's some texture, but yeah. I'm sure in person it would be quite a different experience. Can we quickly talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
Because so we chatted, oh gosh, a few months ago now, the first time, and I think, and you can correct me from my memory on this, but you were saying, well, and you did bring it up today too in conversation about environment around you.
Mm-hmm.
And this space, you were creating it sort of your own and creating it into an environment. I think you said you weren't quite happy with the color that was on the wall or something. And so this was your way, like bringing your art into it was your way of making it into a space for you that you felt good energetically to work in and that kind of thing. So I'd love to hear more from you about um, art, creativity, using it to yeah, add something into the environment
Mhm.
that we're in.
Yeah, oh, I have so much to say about this. So, even when you incorporate colored walls, like I'm in a green room right now, and yes, that is more interesting than having like white, gray, or beige walls. But any wall to me is not complete without artwork, and you don't truly understand or feel the difference until you have experienced both in the same room. So, and there's times where like I have I mean I have art all over my walls, but when I take a piece down because maybe I've decided to go work on it again, or maybe I just want to move it to a different spot and I don't have a replacement for the spot it just came down from, there is an emptiness. There is like this lacking feeling. There's this unfinished feeling. And I love art as a decorative piece, not just for decor, but if we're looking at it in the decor sense, it adds immediate intrigue and personality and energy and depth to a room that just cannot exist without having something on the wall. And prints, I would say, are better than nothing, but they also don't carry the same life and story that an original piece does because it's original. Like you can't translate that to a print. And I love them because they, to me, they are like the cheapest, easiest, quickest way to change up your space. And many people think that when they're looking at buying a piece of original art, also because it's an investment when you do, but they often think that they need to know where it's going to go. And you don't. You can have an
Mm.
idea of where it's going to go. And there's nothing wrong with buying a piece and knowing where it's going to go, but it doesn't have to stay there. And art is going to tell you where it wants to be. So if you buy a piece being very clear on its location and it doesn't end up working there, then there can be feelings of disappointment. But if you're open to listening to the piece and bringing it into a different area than what you had planned, you're not going to be disappointed because you're still getting value from it. And art loves to be moved around. So again, even if you buy it for a particular location, when you move it, it brings new life. You have different lighting, you have different objects surrounding it, you see it in a different sense because typically how we use rooms in a home are different. Like what we do in a bedroom is very different from a kitchen, which is very different from an office. So you're going to experience a piece differently. Um, yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there for now that art immediately changes up your space. It changes how you feel in the space. And what I love to say about my art in particular is, and I use this for myself, and it's also how my art serves other people. It's very difficult to ignore what you've acknowledged is true for you when you have a piece that's staring you in the face every single day you walk past it, reminding you of whatever that thing is, because all of my pieces represent some are more specific than others, but generally speaking, they all represent a desire for something more in your life, to step into greater capability and potential and possibility and belief. And if that's what you want and it's not what you have, and you're not actively doing things to work towards whatever the something bigger, more, or different is, it's hard to live with yourself, truly, when you walk
Hmm.
past a painting that represents that thing you've already acknowledged and you're not doing anything. So it's actually a really great motivator, and I call like kind yet silent accountability partner, because it's not calling you names, it's not raising its voice at you, it's not giving you a hard time. It's just like, hey, I'm still here and you know it. Like, you can't forget about me.
Well, and that's what I think I love about art too, is that while you're creating it and you have this everything that's going on in your mind and your energy and everything is going into it for you, somebody else who doesn't know what your mindset was while you're creating it or anything like that, they're getting their own interpretation of the art and could have something that then a message
Mhm.
that they see out of that art and they are able to bring it home and utilize it for themselves in a different capacity, but all while the same being attached to it for a piece that brings them something day in and day out as they walk by it all the time.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And it's partly why I don't like I will if I'm asked directly, but I don't love to tell people what a piece represents, because like they can, I don't mind sharing what my art as a whole represents and how I approach the creative process. But art is meant to resonate on an individual level, and especially with abstract, where it's not obviously telling you what it is, there is room for interpretation. And there's so much like nuance and variation of opinions and belief in this world that I want my art to be allowed to represent more than one thing, not just what I
Mm.
say it is. And
Hmm.
depending on where a person is at, they might get certain pieces of what my initial intent was, but not others. And somebody else might get something totally different. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want them to be able to get what they need. I'm looking up at one of my my paintings that says I was meant for more. And just going back to the beginning of our conversation where you said like you love hearts and you love finding hearts in things, totally unintentional. But I had this big, like sporadic wild mark that actually ended up looking like a big heart, kind of framing the wordage that I incorporated. And it just made like it makes me love it even more that that came up. So yeah, what
You're
was I saying? Just about, yeah, what
you're
it
gonna see
represents.
hearts everywhere now.
It's so true. Yeah, so it is open for interpretation, and when you allow a piece to evolve its meaning, then you allow a piece to meet you where you are as you evolve. That it you're not limiting what it can offer you. And I think that's so important.
I think that was a bit of a mic drop there, Kate. I
I just
really
let me
loved
grab my
that.
mic.
I love that though, because I think that's the thing we have to remember is like we are constantly evolving, we are constantly changing, week to week, day to day, I mean, hour to hour, and we really need to allow things to meet us where we're at and also understand that there's growth and evolving and changing and all that too. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
sorry, if you have, you can go ahead if you have.
I was just gonna say, one of the things that draw a lot of people to my work, and I'm bringing this up in the context of how art can influence a space and how you feel in it, is they love the color. And oftentimes, when it comes to home design and decorating and what you do with your space, people are afraid to commit to color because I think there's this association that they might get tired of it, or especially in a home where you have something more permanent, like say cabinet colors or I don't know, carpet, even paint. Like paint is so easy to put a new coat of paint on, like to cover up what was before it. But there's just this mentality that, oh, I'm painting the wall. Like I don't want to choose something that I might tire of, or it's too much effort to paint over it if I sell the house or whatever it is. And so there's this inclination to avoid going bold in one's home or choosing to integrate color in like more permanent ways. And I put like permanent in quotes because nothing is truly permanent. Yes, there are more um, expensive ways to incorporate change. So if you're worried about that, then when it comes to tile or vanities or things that have a higher cost, like yeah, maybe avoid the color there, but don't avoid color overall. And so if you're not sure how to incorporate it, colorful art is such a great way to bring in like more warmth. I say warmth not necessarily in the sense of warm colors, but paintings with color just are more warm. There is a trend right now that has its place, and I'm not like speaking badly of it because I like elements of it, but like black and white is huge right now. Everywhere I look seems to be like, okay, black and white exteriors and black and white bathrooms and black and white kitchens and black and white everything. And then there's also neutrals, like warmer neutrals, incorporating more taupes and beiges and creams that carry a warmer undertone, but there isn't color warmth there. And I really wish people would feel liberated enough to choose to choose color and to not be afraid of incorporating it. And so if there is this fear or resistance or uncertainty around it, well, original art is a great way for that because you can totally change the feel and look of a space by changing, like even changing neutral paint colors and then having like your colored artwork on top. There's between rugs, pillows and bedding and artwork, you can keep the same neutral foundation of walls, floor, whatever else, lighting, and have your space totally transformed just through rugs, pillows and bedding, and artwork. So yeah, I would just say like to circle back to how I started this, people are drawn to my work for the color because I think they're not sure how to incorporate color into their own homes. And it's a great kind of safe way to incorporate more color that leaves you feeling more energized and alive without restricting what your space can be or whether or not you tire of it. Because by changing other elements in your home, you can also change how a piece feels. Um, yeah.
Which I love. And going back to one of the things you said too, it's like it's not permanent. So you can bring that piece home. You might have an idea of where it's going to go in your house. Um, and even once you get it home, the colors you see might even change slightly because the lighting will be different from where you found that art to now in your home. So that I think for me anyways, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that I can get some art and if I bring it home and I think I know where it's going to go, that it's okay if it doesn't go in that spot. That's
Mhm.
okay. Um,
I see a blank wall behind you, Megan.
I have so many blank walls.
It's also a neutral wall.
Um, yes, I really do have a lot of blank walls because like you brought up the commitment aspect to it. Like that for I have this, yes, I do. I have a thing where it's hard for me to commit to certain things because it's also a limiting block that I have. There's a thing about putting holes in my walls that I have a hard
I
time
have
with
that.
because I grew up with someone, my father, um, could not stand anything that resulted in putting a hole in our wall. It's like, even if it was like a little tiny, those little tiny nails that you use that you wouldn't even notice if they were in the drywall after they were pulled out, like I couldn't even use that. to put up anything in my room. The only thing I was allowed to use was um what's that blue stuff that came out that was
The
so
sticky
popular?
tack.
Yes.
I think there's
That
different names for it, but I know what you're talking about.
that was like pretty much the only thing I was allowed to use ever for anything. Well,
Yeah.
of course, that only holds so much weight.
Hmm.
So then when I moved into my house, of course, having all these very neutral colored blank walls, I was like, I'm gonna go get art.
Yeah.
And then I can commit.
Yeah. So, Megan, you might already know this, but can I suggest something?
Of yes.
I said before that art is one of the greatest teachers. And I described like how I use the creation process as how it can teach things, but also the purchasing. And if you know that putting holes in your wall is a hurdle that you want to get over, then go get a piece. Like it doesn't even have to be an original art. Go to HomeSense and grab like a picture that you like, or no, okay. I'm really this idea keeps evolving. Don't even get anything. Just go put a nail in. Like just do what you need to
That
do
feels
to get
so
over it.
that feels so wrong in my body
It
right
does.
now to just put a hole in
Fair.
my wall with no purpose
And I
except for to
want
put a hole.
to well, and that is the purpose. And when I said get over it, I don't mean get over your
I know.
aversion. I mean
I know.
to literally get over the hurdle and experience
Yes.
what it's like to be on the other side.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for this.
It's the equivalent of me like squeezing a tube of paint onto my canvas with no justification other than seeing what I perceive to be the waste.
Yes. Okay. Well, I might have to go do this.
If
Maybe
you
not
do it,
today,
I
but
want to know how it goes.
I'm totally doing it. I've got the little pin tacks downstairs and I'm gonna do it. I really am. Um, yeah, I am. But that's the thing, right? Like these are the things, these are the blocks, these are the things, and why I love your story and your journey and sharing everything is that um you don't you don't have to identify with being a quote unquote artist to start creating anything. Like
Mhm.
just the act of doing something different and tapping into, I mean, and for me, because I get caught up in perfectionism
Mhm.
a lot, which also one of the things that you were talking about, and how you tried to replicate something that you saw, but we're disconnected from it. And that's really what happens for me if I'm not creating something from my own vision and inspiration that I have gone and researched for. I'm just doing it for the sake of copying something. I'm so disconnected. And then I end up getting into the whole like, but it doesn't have that color in this space. Or like I wanted to do art with my kids one day. And but I really didn't feel creative in the moment, but I really felt like I needed to do something creative. So I did. I totally went on Pinterest and was like, I think we were working with watercolors that day. And I found these cute little flamingos. And I'm like, well, this is going to be so easy. I can make 20 of these. And I started playing with the color to get the pink for the flamingo, and that felt wrong because it wasn't looking like the photo. And then I was trying to, next thing I know, it's like the shape of how they created and like how you were talking about the different layers of everything, right? So like with watercolor, of course, you are changing the structure of the paper you're using as soon as water hits it because now it's wet. Um, so like there was so many different things at play that I was like, and the perfectionism and the control, right? Because that's where it comes from too. I couldn't control the end result. I wanted it to look a certain way at the end, but I couldn't control because I'm not that person. I didn't have the inspiration that they had. Um, so it was definitely a learning lesson and a reminder for me that finding a way to connect with what I'm doing, no matter what it is, whether it's writing, whether it's this right now, us being together and sharing stories back and forth and talking and relating and like all of those things. I just have to be true to who I am and show up in that with that energy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And there's a connection to entrepreneurship and business building in what you've said. And same with your space. And like you identified that um you have blank walls, that you have a desire to have artwork, but you have these blocks as well. And when we look at that in the context of entrepreneurship, people don't build businesses striving for perfection. And like they might have that as like an end goal, but I think all entrepreneurs recognize that you're not going to get it perfect off of right off the bat. And if that is what you're striving for, then you're probably never going to start because it's an impossible undefined state to live up to. And you are the person who is defining that state. And so we are all our own worst critics. And if we're defining that state, we're probably never going to live up to it. So we're setting ourselves up for failure right off the bat by holding ourselves to a standard that truly cannot be achieved because we're never going to be satisfied enough. There's always going to be something else we'd prefer to do. And so I really encourage people, especially in entrepreneurship, but anybody who's just wanting more for their life, to play a little bit bigger, to use their home as a safe, explorative place to make the mistakes, to learn what they love more so that they can build
Mm.
the confidence and the resilience and the knowledge to do more. If you can't do it in your home where it's a low risk environment and really the only person or people who experience the impact of whatever happens in your home is you and your family, then if you can't experiment in your own home, then is it reasonable to expect yourself to be able to do new things in your business where you have so much more on the line?
Love that. That sums up a lot in a lot of ways. And I think how you just articulated all that, um, it really, it's so true. We have these safe spaces and we need to be able to be uncomfortable in our own safe spaces to help us compound that effort that we put in so that outside of this we can even, it's like get our confidence built up
Mhm,
and get our trusting that we're gonna be okay.
mhm.
We can take that leap and we're gonna be okay because we've done it here, we're safe, we're good, we made it out the other side, and now we can go and do it out there too.
Yeah, discover your voice. Like you said, with trying to recreate these flamingos and not loving it, it's because it wasn't coming from you. And your home is a way to discover your voice and what resonates, what you like, what you love, what you don't like, so you can translate that beyond the walls of your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just checking time. We're right there. Is there any other points or anything that we maybe didn't bring up that you might want to touch on? I feel like we've really covered a lot of ground with our conversation today.
Yeah, I think I'm happy with like where the conversation went. I think it was comprehensive to cover everything that like I would want to share with somebody, where you can use your home to build confidence in yourself. You can use it to explore what's most meaningful to you. Art does that as well. There's so much value in getting out of your comfort zone and trying new things. And it's really about shifting that mentality towards I can't or I'm afraid to I can and what if I could? What more is
Mm,
there? Um, and I think like there are tools between like using your home and leveraging art and even through like I host workshops that walk people through the process of uncovering blocks and moving past them in the safe environment of the canvas. And there's so much more to be had on like the other side of fear and discomfort. So there are tools available to help you experience what that's like to be on the other side of what's uncomfortable. And I just say like use them because the world needs more people following their dreams, taking risks, not just for the sake of taking risks and being bold and leaving an impact, but taking risks because you're honoring what is true and right for you. And the world is a better place when you honor that and you contribute to the goodness that can happen in the world when you honor what's right and true for you.
uh, that's, I love that, how you explained it. It's the great way to, I feel, say thank you so much for being on this podcast, Kate. I know I'm inspired. I have so many different thoughts running through my head about different things. And I hope that given some of the different examples and scenarios that we talked about today, that the listeners, I feel like, will also be very inspired and try different ways to get out of their comfort zones and get through some limiting beliefs and blocks and everything. So thank you so much for being on today. It was a pleasure talking to you again. And yeah, I will share all the links and notes and everything with the audience in the show notes for them to get in touch with you because I think that you have so much to offer and your art would be great to spread around.
I would love that. That's my goal. And I hope you share, at least with me, if not to fellow listeners, that if and when, I'm going to say when you go and put a hole in your wall, I would love to to hear what that's like for you.
Well, I already planned on using it as like a content creation. I was gonna set up my tripod and set up a camera and record myself doing it and say, Kate Rogers made me do this.
I'll take responsibility for it. That's fine.
I can only take responsibility if it works out. No, just kidding. No, I'm just no, it was I am going to do it because I think yeah, I can feel it already like bringing up that sort of anxiousness, but I also can see myself and I'm visualizing myself at the end of it being like, oh, that was
Mhm.
not so bad at all. Like
Yeah.
now, now you can go and hoard all the beautiful art and put it everywhere and be
Mhm.
okay with that.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that anxiousness that's coming up is actually desire, anxiousness
Mm.
around making what you want happen because that is unfamiliar. What's it going to be like? What version of you are you going to be when you have what you want or when you're at least closer to having what you want?
My jaw just dropped because I love I love these sorts of like deep questions and when people can tap into different things. I really do feel like we could probably talk for like
Yeah, we could.
another like 3 hours and just go into so many different conversations with that. But it's true. I will have to say, as soon as you did say that, there was a part of me that's it it does resonate. It does feel true for me that there is a piece. Like I love color. I love color, which is why it's so interesting to me that I don't have a lot of it. Like,
Mm.
so that's the thing. Like I love color. Like when I see like for instance, um people who have super colorful doors, right? And like in Ireland, we went to this place called Dingle. See, this is what happens. I can just keep talking and talking, talking.
I
I'll just
love it.
finish the story.
Okay.
But we were in Dingle visiting. This was before we built the house. And everybody had such colorful doors. And I really wanted a colorful door for my house when I built this house. But then it was like like I don't know if I'd call it default, but color is my default. Outside of that, I think is oh no, I can't think of words right now. Um like the block, the wall, the not being true in all ways to who I am.
Mhm.
And I wrote this word down and I feel like it's very fitting for this. You brought up the word like exposure before. So I feel like if I was to have all the colorful things all the time, there'd be a part of me that's being exposed. Um, that maybe I'm not quite accepting of, if that makes any
Mm.
sense. See, now I feel like I've gone so deep within that I could go on this whole other talk about it, but
Another
yeah,
podcast episode.
right? Totally, totally.
Thanks
Um,
for sharing that.
no problem. Thank you so much, Kate. I'm going to wrap it up there. It's been such a pleasure. I do feel like we could talk for so long, but I think that we've gotten a lot of great things, a lot of takeaways, for the audience today, and I really appreciate all your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been such an honor, and I'm glad to share my insights with your audience. So appreciate it.
Well,
Okay,
thanks again,
truly,
Kate.
Megan, thank you so much. I loved chatting with you. Like you said, I think we could just keep going on and on and on, and that's just a testament to how we can relate to each other and build off of what we're saying. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you
Oh,
for asking me
good.
to be here.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Anchor Your Dreams. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. A big thank you to our incredible guest for sharing their wisdom and insights. If you resonated with today's episode and want to explore more about turning your dreams into reality, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We have a lineup of amazing guests and valuable content coming your way. Don't forget to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Share your thoughts, insights, and your own journey using the hashtag #AnchorYourDreams. Head over to our website at meghanmcquillan.com in the podcast section, where you'll find the show notes, resources, and information about upcoming episodes. Before we wrap up, I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you. Your support means the world to me, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Remember, anchored dreams become goals. Anchored goals become results. Until next time, dream big and stay anchored.